Welcome to Godless and Grounded.
There is something deeply human about the search for meaning. Every person on earth has felt confusion, fear, hope, sadness, or loneliness at some point in life. These emotions are powerful, and they shape the way people think. They also shape the way people believe. Many people feel that belief in God comes from evidence, from miracles, or from spiritual experiences. But when we study the human mind, we discover that belief in God has far more to do with psychology than with proof. Human thinking is full of biases. These biases are mental shortcuts that help people make sense of the world, but they also create illusions. They push people toward conclusions that feel true, even when there is no solid reason behind them. These biases are not signs of intelligence or ignorance. They are simply part of human nature. The mind wants explanations, and when an explanation feels comforting, people accept it without questioning it. In this voiceover, we will explore 12 human biases that shape belief in God. You will notice how ordinary they are. You will see how they work in daily life. And once you understand them, you will be able to see why belief can feel natural even when the evidence is missing. One of the strongest biases is something psychologists call the agency bias. Humans are wired to look for intention behind everything. Thousands of years ago, this bias helped our ancestors survive. If a hunter heard a sound in the bushes, it was safer to assume that something alive was hiding there. It might be a lion or a predatory animal. That quick judgment improved survival. This tendency became part of the human mind. Even today, people look at events and imagine intention behind them. When a storm destroys a village, some people assume that a higher power decided to do it. When someone escapes an accident, people say that something saved them. Even when no intention exists, the mind creates one because it feels meaningful. This bias makes it very easy to imagine that the universe is controlled by someone, even if that someone has no evidence to support their existence. Another common bias is pattern seeking. Humans are natural pattern hunters. They look at random clouds and see shapes. They look at stars and connect them into animals and heroes. They notice coincidences and feel they contain hidden messages. The brain does this because patterns help people understand the world. But this ability also creates illusions. When people find meaning in random events, they often think that a divine hand arranged them. If someone prays for a job and later receives a job offer, the mind links the two events even when both things happened independently. This creates a sense of spiritual connection that feels real even though it is simply the brain noticing patterns where none exist. People rarely notice when many prayers go unanswered. They only remember the one time something aligned with their hope. This selective memory strengthens belief without any real evidence behind it. Humans also have what psychologists call confirmation bias. This is the tendency to look only for information that supports what they already believe. If someone believes that God answers prayers, they will notice every event that appears to confirm this belief. They will ignore the far larger number of prayers that remain unanswered. If someone thinks a holy book is perfect, they will avoid information that challenges that idea. Confirmation bias works like a filter. It hides anything that can make a person uncomfortable. The result is that belief remains strong even when the facts are weak. People think their belief is based on truth, but in reality it is supported by careful mental ignoring of anything that does not fit the story. There is another bias known as the authority bias. People trust leaders, elders, scholars, and religious figures. When someone in authority speaks with confidence, people accept their words as truth. The brain assumes that someone older or someone respected must know more. This habit formed early in human evolution because following leaders helped groups survive. But in religion, this bias becomes powerful. Priests, scholars, and religious teachers speak with great certainty. They use sacred language. They appear wise. This gives people a sense that these individuals cannot be wrong. But confidence is not proof. Knowledge passed down through tradition is not evidence. Another bias is memory distortion. Human memory is not a recording device. It changes with time. It mixes imagination with events. It adds emotion where none existed. People misremember things all the time. When someone thinks they had a spiritual experience years ago, the memory may have changed so much that the original event is no longer recognizable. A simple coincidence can become a miracle in memory. A dream can become a message. A gut feeling can become a sign. One of the most influential biases is fear of the unknown. Humans dislike uncertainty. They dislike unanswered questions. When the mind faces something it cannot explain, it fills the gap with something familiar. For thousands of years, people did not understand thunder, earthquakes, plagues, or the movements of the stars. They believed that gods were behind these events. Even today, when people feel lost, they turn to belief because it gives a sense of order. Fear makes the mind rush to conclusions. It makes the invisible world feel more real than the physical one. This fear becomes a doorway that leads to belief in a higher power. Another very human bias is the desire for meaning. People do not like the idea that life is just a random event. They want their existence to have a purpose. They want their struggles to have significance. Religion gives them a story that explains everything. It tells them why they are here. It gives them a reason to keep going. This desire for meaning is powerful, and when a belief satisfies it, people accept it without much resistance. The idea that humans are part of a divine plan makes them feel valuable. It gives them strength. People also experience what can be called childhood imprinting. A belief that enters the mind at a young age becomes part of the person's identity. Children do not question what adults tell them. They accept it without doubt. If a child grows up hearing that God sees them, loves them, watches them, and judges them, these ideas become normal and familiar. Later in life, these beliefs feel natural even when they are not based on any proof. Childhood beliefs create a mental foundation that is hard to break. It becomes part of the person's worldview, not because it is true, but because it arrived early. Another strong bias is emotional reasoning. When people feel something strongly, they assume the feeling must be true. If a person feels touched during prayer, they assume that something outside themselves created that emotion. If they feel guilt after breaking a religious rule, they think the feeling is a message from a higher power. But emotions come from the mind, not from outside forces. The human brain produces emotions based on beliefs, experiences, and expectations. Emotional reasoning makes people trust their feelings more than logic. It makes them believe that inner sensations are reflections of supernatural truth. There is also something called availability bias. This is when the mind judges truth based on the information that is easiest to recall. If a person hears many stories about miracles, they think miracles happen often even when none have been verified. If someone grows up in a society where belief in God is constantly repeated, they assume it must be normal or true because it is familiar. The more exposure the mind has to a belief, the more believable it becomes. This does not mean the belief is based on evidence. It only means the mind has heard it so many times that it accepts it without effort. Human fascination with the extraordinary is another major factor. People enjoy stories that feel magical. They enjoy mysterious things. They enjoy the idea that the universe has hidden forces. This fascination makes supernatural claims attractive. People want to believe that there is more to the world than what they see. Stories about miracles, divine intervention, and spiritual encounters excite the imagination. This emotional excitement often replaces the need for factual investigation. These biases do not operate separately. They reinforce each other. When someone grows up hearing about God from family and community, their childhood imprinting is strong. Then they hear religious authorities speaking confidently, which strengthens the authority bias. Then they see a coincidence in life, and their pattern-seeking bias activates. Then they feel comfort in prayer, which satisfies their emotional bias. These pieces combine to create a powerful belief system that feels natural and unquestionable. These biases are not signs of weakness or stupidity. They are simply built into the human brain. They helped people survive in ancient times. They helped people form groups, create cultures, and support one another. But in the modern world, these same biases can lead people to conclusions that have no evidence behind them. Many people believe in God not because they have examined the idea deeply, but because their minds are shaped by these psychological forces. The belief feels true because it feels familiar, comforting, and socially accepted. This understanding does not insult believers. It simply explains why belief is so widespread. When we understand how the mind creates meaning, we can see why supernatural ideas flourish. People do not believe in God because the universe demands belief. They believe because their minds are designed to find answers, create patterns, seek comfort, avoid uncertainty, trust authority, and rely on memory that is far from perfect. When these psychological forces combine, belief becomes almost automatic. When we look deeper into human psychology, We find that these biases do not only influence religious belief in general, but also shape the way people interpret their everyday experiences. Many people who feel that God speaks to them through signs are simply responding to these mental shortcuts. For example, when a person is confused about a decision and suddenly hears a song with meaningful lyrics, they feel that a higher power guided them. But the human mind makes connections all the time. The moment something feels relevant, the mind grabs it and assigns meaning to it. This is pattern seeking mixed with emotional reasoning. The feeling is strong, but the logic is weak. Still, for many people, that emotional moment becomes the foundation of lifelong belief. There is also something very interesting about the way humans react to randomness. People do not like the idea that events happen without purpose. If something painful happens, they want to know why. If something lucky happens, they want to believe that it happened for a reason. The human mind has a strong dislike for randomness because randomness feels cold and uncaring. This is why people say that everything happens for a reason. It is easier to believe that a higher power decided something than to accept that life can be unpredictable and unfair. This desire for purpose gives religious explanations great power in the human imagination. Humans also struggle with something psychologists call the optimism bias. People want to believe that things will turn out well. Even when reality is harsh, they look for hope. Religious ideas often promise perfect justice, eternal life, paradise, or ultimate reward. These promises feed the optimism bias. They give people something bright to hold on to. Even if there is no evidence for life after death, the emotional comfort is so strong that many people choose to believe it anyway. The bias makes optimistic stories feel more true than realistic ones. Another very human bias is known as the tendency to anthropomorphize the world. Humans project human qualities onto things that are not human. Children talk to toys and imagine they have feelings. Adults yell at phones, cars, and computers as if these objects can hear them. This habit continues when people think about nature. They imagine the universe has intentions. They imagine that storms, diseases, and earthquakes express messages. This leads naturally to the belief in a personal God. The universe feels alive, and the mind fills that imaginary life with human emotions and desires. Another psychological force is the survival instinct. Humans want to live. They want to protect their families. They want to escape danger. The idea of a higher power who watches over them offers a sense of security. Even when there is no evidence that someone is protecting them, the belief reduces fear and increases courage. Many people find strength in believing that they are not alone in a dangerous world. This survival instinct mixes with imagination and produces faith that feels unshakable. The belief did not come from evidence. It came from the mind trying to protect itself. There is also something called the moral bias. Humans like to think of themselves as good. They want to believe that their values come from a higher source. Religion gives them a moral identity. It tells them that their goodness has cosmic meaning. Many people believe in God because the belief makes them feel morally valuable. They think that their actions matter in the eyes of a higher power. This gives them a sense of dignity. Even though morality can exist without religion, the moral bias makes people cling to the belief that goodness requires divine approval. A related final bias is the purpose projection bias. Humans naturally assume that everything exists for a purpose. When children are asked why mountains exist, they say that mountains exist so that animals can climb them, or that rivers exist so that people can drink water. Adults continue to use this type of thinking. They think that the universe must have a purpose. They think their life must have a purpose assigned by someone. This assumption leads directly to belief in a creator. People imagine that everything, even the shape of a leaf or the position of the planets, was designed with intention. But purpose is something the mind creates. It is not something the universe provides automatically. These biases work silently in the background. They shape thoughts, memories, feelings, choices, and beliefs. People often have no idea that these biases influence them. They feel that their belief comes from spiritual truth, but in reality, it comes from the structure of the human mind. The belief feels natural because the brain makes it feel natural. The belief feels correct because the brain creates that feeling. The belief feels comforting because the brain wants comfort. The belief feels meaningful because the brain wants meaning. Once we understand these biases, we start to see belief in God through a different lens. Instead of seeing it as something revealed by a higher power, we see it as something created inside the human brain. The imagination fills the gaps. Emotion gives it strength. Culture spreads it. Family reinforces it. Community protects it. And once all these factors combine, the belief becomes a permanent part of the person's identity. Consider how often people base their belief on personal stories. Someone might say they prayed and felt calm afterward. Someone else might say they avoided a car accident and believed that something protected them. Someone else might say they felt a warm sensation during a religious ceremony. These experiences feel real, but they are driven by emotion, memory distortion, cultural influence, and the natural desire for meaning. When many people share these experiences within the same group, they reinforce each other. The belief grows stronger, even though none of these experiences can be measured or verified. In daily life, these biases make belief feel like the most natural conclusion. A person looks at the beauty of the sky and their mind automatically assigns intention. A person feels a strong emotion during a difficult moment and believes a higher power touched them. A person hears a story repeated many times in childhood and accepts it as truth without asking for evidence. A person sees tragedy and believes it has a purpose, because the alternative feels too painful to consider. All of these reactions come from the human mind, not from any supernatural force. Even intelligent, educated people fall into these biases because biases do not affect only those with less knowledge. They affect everyone equally. The human brain evolved to survive, not to uncover absolute truth. It evolved to find patterns, not to verify them. It evolved to seek comfort, not to evaluate evidence. It evolved to remember stories, not to check their accuracy. This is why belief in God is widespread across all cultures and all levels of intelligence. The mind is built to believe long before it is built to question. Understanding these biases does not make a person cold or emotionless. It simply helps us see the human mind more clearly. It shows us that belief in God is not the result of divine communication, but the result of psychological forces that work silently inside all of us. Once we understand these forces, we become more aware of how our thoughts are shaped. We begin to ask deeper questions. We begin to separate feelings from facts. We begin to see that truth requires effort, while belief often requires only emotion. The world is full of mysteries. The universe is vast and strange. Human existence raises many questions that science has not answered yet. But accepting unknowns is part of intellectual honesty. We do not need to fill every gap with the idea of a higher power. We can accept that some things remain unexplained without inventing supernatural explanations. This is a sign of mental courage. It shows that truth matters more than comfort. Humans have created many beliefs throughout history. Every culture had its own gods, myths, spirits, and supernatural stories. Thousands of these gods have disappeared as cultures changed. Today only a few remain, and even these will fade with time as human knowledge grows. The human mind creates gods, not the other way around. These beliefs rise and fall based on psychological needs, social influence, and cultural evolution. When we step back and observe all of this, belief in God becomes understandable. It is not strange. It is not foolish. It is simply human. But once we see the biases behind belief, we also understand that the belief is not supported by evidence. It is supported by emotion, habit, and mental shortcuts. The world becomes clearer when we recognize this. We can appreciate the beauty of life without imagining invisible forces behind it. We can find meaning in our relationships, our achievements, and our experiences without believing that someone in the sky planned it. Humans find strength in knowledge. The more we understand our own minds, the more we grow. Awareness replaces illusions. Clarity replaces fear. Reason replaces emotional confusion. When people free themselves from these biases, they begin to think with independence. They start asking questions that lead to deeper understanding. They stop relying on ideas that were planted in their minds long ago. Instead, they choose ideas that are supported by evidence and reason. Belief in God will always feel natural to many people because it aligns with how the mind works. But once we explore the biases behind belief, we see that natural feelings do not guarantee truth. They only guarantee that the mind is doing what it has always done. When we understand this, we become more aware of our thinking. We take control of it. We choose truth over comfort. And that is the first step toward intellectual freedom.